Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Now, in this episode, we're talking about driving action with customers. And I mean that in the broadest sense. You know, people that you deliver a service to. And that could be an end customer choosing your solution or an internal department that benefits from what you do. And we're going to talk about some top tips on how to drive action with them. Now, our guest today shares so many great tips on LinkedIn and is a real voice in the community. She's also the head of sales engineering at 360 Learning. So please welcome to the podcast, Maddie Suppon.
Hi, Ben. Nice to see you. I'm super excited to be here. I'm really excited to talk about these 6 tips and really start to share some of these things that I've been sharing on LinkedIn, but more in like a broader sense to your audience. So super excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. And I wonder, for all those people that don't know you,
yeah,
could you sort of share a little bit about what it is you do now and your background that got you to there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I never imagined that I would be in tech, let alone sales in tech or ed tech in general. So when I was in college, I started and I needed an internship. I'm a communications major, and where I went to school, they had there's like 2 places that you really worked as a college student. You worked at an insurance company, or you worked at this tech company that I worked at, and I got an internship there, and I was really happy. And then they offered me a full-time position when I graduated from college, and I said, I want to move to Florida, and they said, amazing, go do that, but you can work from home. So I did that, and I moved across the country, and I just continued to work there for about 5.5 years in implementation and support. So in the post-sale type of world, answering service calls, also going on-site and doing implementations for some really large Florida customers. And then I transitioned kind of naturally over into the sales role because it made sense to send Maddie to some of these Florida sales because she's close and she can do it. And then when the sales position opened up, the sales engineering position opened up, it was a very natural step for me. So then I was about 2 years there doing sales engineering. And then in 2021, in the spring, I noticed this position for 360 Learning, and I would be the first sales engineer at 360 Learning in the US North America market. And it was just such a cool opportunity for me to be the first one to kind of build the foundation and really start in the startup world, and to kind of map out what the North America sales engineering department would look like using all the things that I've learned. I really threw myself into professional development in 2020 because there wasn't much to do. And then 2021, and I wanted to see what I had learned. And so that's kind of what landed me here today, and really what I love to talk about and I would love to share about.
Brilliant. And so now you're leading a team at 360 Learning.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually have 3 on my team. And I also am still an individual contributor as well. So I wear 2 hats, and it is definitely a struggle and a daily kind of balance of like, how can I make sure I'm putting my team first and protecting my team, and making sure I'm coaching them and making sure they're getting everything that they need from me and supporting. And then also on the flip side of that, how can I make sure that my account executives have what they need? How can I make sure my deals are ready to go? My demos are all set. So it's definitely a kind of duality of roles for me, which is, I think, why some of these tips are super important, because I share them with my team, but they're also really great reminders for me as well.
Well, what a great teaser there. You're whetting the appetite of everybody with these tips. So these are kind of 6 tips that you have are living, breathing, a finding that makes an impact. What sort of benefit do you think these tips, we'll unveil them in a minute, what sort of benefit do you think these tips bring to people?
I think awareness is really important. Once you're kind of self-aware of some of these tips, you can just continue to work with, whether it's your prospect or your internal customers, or, your external customers, depending on kind of where you sit in the tech world. But once you have some self-awareness around these, it's just going to make your relationships with those customers, prospects, whoever, better. And it's also going to allow you to deliver a better service, no matter kind of where you lie within the process there.
Right. So I think we've kept everybody waiting long enough. Do you want to unveil what's your first tip?
My first tip is curiosity is key. So this idea is, if a customer tells you something, ask why again, and then ask why again. It's the idea of digging in, and don't just take their first answer kind of at face value. Have that genuine curiosity to understand why this isn't working. Hey, what's your pain today? And they, tell you your pain or whatever it is. And you're like, okay, you just write it down. Ask, why is that your pain? What does that cause you? Dig into like each one of those things. Try to see how deep you can kind of get down that rabbit hole, because once you start to really understand every aspect and have that natural curiosity, you're going to understand how you can win the deal, how you can keep that customer, how you can prevent churn, how you can better implement them, whatever that looks like. Once you really start to understand them and have that natural curiosity, it's just going to drive success further.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes in tech, and I've been guilty of this, and I've definitely seen other people doing it as well, is this idea that I've got my answer, my solution locked and loaded, ready to go. And it doesn't really matter what you say to me next. I'm basically sat here nodding, waiting to speak. And this idea that actually, if we exercise a bit more curiosity, ask a few more questions, actually the solution that you've got ready to go might not be the solution that's required, but also that you can, even if it is, you can start to tweak your language. You can start to tailor the angles that you focus on. Is that sort of thing that you find happens?
Absolutely. And that's where you can start to, jot down some notes. Obviously, you're going to be taking notes around like what their pains are and things like that. But let's say that they use a specific word. I had a customer that called their employees business partners, and they kept referring to them as business partners, and the pains around their business partners and this and that. Well, that's a very unnatural thing for me to say, but I tried as my hardest to go ahead and add that in there. And so how do your business partners do this? What are their pains today? What does this look like for them? By using their language and being able to have that natural curiosity, you're just going to open them up, and they're not going to be so reserved and guarded because they feel like they're having a very natural conversation with you. And then to your point, Ben, you might uncover that what you were thinking in your mind isn't the right solution, or you can actually pitch it so much better and so much stronger because you actually understand what their true pains are and not just assuming where things are. Because we all know when you and I assume, we know what that saying goes. It's going to make we know the rest of that sentence there. But we never ever want to just go in assuming. You may have a game plan, which is definitely so important to have a game plan going in. But once you start to uncover things and have that natural curiosity, you have to be okay to pivot or just like double down on like what you learned in that conversation.
Yeah. It's just made me think. I did a coaching course with a chap called Michael Bungay Stainer years ago. And his point was all about, he called it taming your advice monster. And trying to exercise that curiosity first before you jump to advice answer, but exercise that curiosity first. Just made me think of that. Awesome tip. Should we move on?
Let's go on to the next one. The next one is a big one. The next one is a big one, and it kind of stacks onto, actually, you're going to see a trend as we kind of go through the 6 of them. They're going to kind of stack on and like have a waterfall effect, thinking curiosity as like early stages discovery, kind of where we talk about in the sales process. But that early stage may be implementation, where you're just trying to get to know, and that maybe early stage of dating, if you will, like trying to get to know that person, that company, whatever. And then we're going to stack it all the way down into like the value close, that last step, how to like seal the deal, if you will. So these are all going to kind of pile up on top of each other.
Brilliant. But so then, are we still at early stages of dating?
We're still at early stages of dating. Yes, we're still at early stages of dating. Now, this next tip here is going to be one that can be used through all the stages, but it's okay to say no, and sometimes no is the right answer. This is such a super uncomfortable thing, especially in sales. I think a lot of times people think, well, we can't say no in sales. We're going to lose the deal if we say no. We can't do that. We can't say no. And we have to sometimes remember that we're trying to be this trusted advisor for the prospect. We're trying to be there to gain their trust. And sometimes a no is the right answer, and it might kill the deal, like, let's be honest. But if it's a super hard no, and that customer desperately needs that, and you try to do some smoke and mirrors or give them half truths or promise things that you know won't be delivered, maybe you'll close the deal. But if we think about the supporting cast members after them, the implementation, the customer support, all the other things that go on in the post-sale world, you're setting them up to be unhappy customers that they're not going to have any longevity at your company. So you want to be truthful and have that tactical no when you go and have those conversations. You might be able to offer additional solutions. That's not something we do today. Here's what we could do to kind of address that need, or, we can talk to product, whatever it is, but don't just promise like, oh, that's coming on a roadmap. Absolutely. I mean, roadmaps are goals. They're not, firm things. Maps
Yeah.
change all the time. So we want to make sure that we're just being super truthful, and saying no is uncomfortable, but you're going to build trust with your prospect. You're going to really build and instill a confidence in their relationship, so that when you get further down the line, if you have some harder conversations, they're going to have trust in you because you were upfront with them whenever that kind of came up. It reminds me, I hate RFPs. I think anybody in the tech world hates doing RFPs, but when we are selected to move on to that next round, sometimes a customer will say, you need to touch on all of these points in our RFP. And it's very much like a checklist. And we go through and we'll look and we can like, yes, we do this. This is on our roadmap. This is like an absolutely hard no, whatever it is. And we go through these lists. What I like to do is in the presentation, I have the list. I have a little like check mark. I have a little red X. I have a like a calendar kind of thing on there to indicate roadmap items. And I'm very clear, and we check those items off the list. And then I jump into the demo so that they know right off the bat, we're not hiding anything from them. We can have those conversations, and it really does help us build trust as we kind of move through the process.
Well, it makes you feel human, doesn't it? It
Totally.
like if I go to ask somebody for something or get advice or buy something, and all they say is yes, 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 yes. At some point you go, this person's just fake and plastic.
Absolutely.
Like, I'm not that perfect, despite what my wife, my mother, tell me, I'm not that.
Yeah.
So they must be fake and plastic, and then that deteriorates the trust, doesn't it? Whereas if you've got somebody that's been honest and go, I wouldn't do it like that, and I wouldn't do it like that for this reason A, B, and C, you might want to think about doing it like that. These are the limitations of doing it in X, Y, and Z. It just feels like an adult human conversation.
Absolutely. And then again, by having those, I really wouldn't do it like that. We see customers have success when they do XYZ, or this is going to be a stronger way for you to go because of the impact it'll have here. Whatever that like framing looks like, you're really building, again, that trusted advisor. That is our goal in sales, and really in implementation. You want to be that trusted person to help them launch their product, to stay happy. I always like to say happy customers start as happy prospects. So if they're happy prospects, they can stay happy customers. If they are, happy, unhappy customer or prospects kind of in the beginning, if they buy because you meet the right thing, you're not going to be able to just hold them and keep that churn. So they start happy in the sales process. We can keep them happy in implementation versus having just, some issues in the maybe a really good sales process, but we lied a lot, or we weren't truthful, or whatever that looks like. And then in the implementation, they're going to be upset because they felt like they had this trusted advisor. They weren't being truthful. Now that implementation team has an uphill battle to get them back to being happy. But if we can keep them happy in both phases, that's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tip 3. So I'm just thinking, are we using our dating analogy still? So we've done the first date. Are we moving on towards date 2, 3, 4 at the moment?
I think yes, maybe a little bit. I don't know if I would say that the next one here is controlling the deal is key. So I don't know if you really want to be controlling in your relationship.
Right, okay, maybe the date analogy breaks down at some point.
It does a little bit. However, I actually think if we take away the word controlling and we say something like, being truthful and setting boundaries and having communications, like that's a sense of controlling the deal, right? So really great to have boundaries and open lines of communication and be very clear of like your needs and wants in a relationship. So that works. But the idea of the tip is here, controlling the deal is key to success. So taking ownership and really driving your deal is where you're going to find success. And I say deal meaning like obviously in the sales process, but really taking control of your implementation, having very clear expectations, having clear goals, kind of asking people to, here's your responsibilities, here's our deadlines. Having these very, very clear lines of expectations and boundaries, I think is really important. And, we all have prospects that say, I need this tomorrow. Everything is tomorrow. Everything is urgent. Everything is on fire. Everything needs to happen immediately. And while there are times where that can be true, we have to make sure that we're not just saying yes, 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 and jumping and jumping and jumping. We need to be able to control that deal. So let's just say a customer emails at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and says, I need an 8 a.m. demo tomorrow. Instead of just immediately saying yes, you can be like, hey, we're so excited that you want to continue this conversation with us. We're going to have to pull in some team members. We want to give you the best tailored demo, the best tailored conversation to meet these needs. We need another day. Let's do this on Friday, whatever it is, acknowledging and then providing them with the value that we're going to bring to not have to do it at 8 o'clock in the morning, next day, whatever it is. So you can control and be able to manage and set clear expectations for why we're taking a little bit longer or what this next, meeting is going to look like, or so on and so forth. But being able to have that gut reaction of amazing, so excited that we want to talk to us.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, that's like, it's 4 o'clock. Technically, our work day is done, 4 or 5 o'clock. We're starting at 8 o'clock in the morning. That's just not gonna work out.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you've got, firstly, the customer says, I need you to jump now, and actually it's not in their best interest that we do that, because like you've explained, we can show up poorly with the wrong people just because of that immediacy.
Yeah.
But then there's the flip side, isn't there, to sort of taking ownership and taking control of a project, which is like when you're going into a meeting, for example, having an idea of what you want to be you want the outcome of that meeting to be, and what you want the next steps to be, and making sure that you then discuss that in the meeting. Quite often I remember, sometimes you've got customers that just drag their feet,
Absolutely.
and you just want some energy and some momentum. And if you leave that meeting without a clear set of who's doing what, by what date, and I'm going to chase them up if they don't, that nothing will ever get done. So it's sort of both saying, pushing back on the immediacy, isn't it? But also sometimes injecting that energy to push things forward.
Totally. And coming up with like a mutual action plan, whether that's a mutual close plan or a mutual implementation plan or whatever, setting those boundaries and controlling the process. There's a book, I forget what it is. It's over on my bookshelf. But essentially it is, we are pros in selling, or you're pros in implementation. Customers are not pros at buying. We're not selling. We're not teaching them how to sell. We're teaching them how to buy. We have to teach them how to buy the product. We have to teach them how to implement something. They don't know those things. And so we have to be there to be like, hey, here's your boundaries. Here's your guidelines. Here's what we need to do. Here's some expectation settings. Here's kind of who's responsible for what, and having those clear things. And that kind of all goes back to control and just really owning your process, owning your customer, owning your deal, owning your implementation, whatever that looks like, being that kind of ringleader of all the madness and all the things floating around, and wrangling everybody in together, and just having that clear directive path that everybody's kind of on the same page with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. We've done three tips.
3 tips.
Should we move on? Tip number 4.
Yes. Tip number 4, practicing the pause. So, Ben, you had mentioned at the beginning on our first tip how active listening is so important. Pausing while active listening is also super important too. You don't have to answer immediately. Make sure you're fully understanding. And, I think we all get excited. I hear somebody asking a question, and I know they're like, this is such a struggle today, blah, 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 blah. I would love if you could do XYZ. And I'm thinking in my head, oh my God, I'm going to knock their socks off with this answer. I'm so excited to go ahead and tell them this. But by doing that, I'm not listening to the rest of their sentence. I'm not listening to the rest of their thing. So if we active listen, one, but then pause to let them finish, let them complete that, let that question sink in, and let it sink in for the whole audience before I jump in and answer immediately. If you're at the very end of your sentence and you're just wrapping up, and I immediately go, yes, Ben, of course, and blah, 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 we're not letting the impact of what you just asked and what I'm about to answer you really hit. People aren't, attention spans are short. So if you do a pause, sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable. It's a practiced thing. We're just excited, we're immediate. But if you pause, whether it's after a question, before you deliver an answer, whatever it is, that pause can be so impactful. Additionally, if you ask a question and no one answers you immediately, wait.
Yeah.
Wait until somebody answers you. If it's something you need, wait, pause. It's so uncomfortable. It can be super uncomfortable on calls. But if you need that answer and nobody is talking, pause, wait, maybe call on somebody that you think might know the answer, ask your main point of contact, whatever it is. But that pause will cause somebody to talk because it's just kind of like natural human. Dead air
Yeah.
is scary. I don't want to do dead air on our podcast, but you guys all know that that is such an uncomfortable thing. If we just sat here for 30 seconds, everybody would be like, well, this is so weird. Nobody's talking. What is going on? Somebody is going to talk and start to roll. And that person talking might not know the answer, but they're going to start saying something. Well, I think that this is our process, blah, 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 blah. And then they're probably going to call on Brenda, for example. But Brenda would know. Brenda never spoke up, but somebody's going to reveal who's going to be able to answer that question for you.
Yeah, I remember, so I completely agree. Silence is just so powerful,
Yes.
powerful in difficult situations where you need to ask difficult questions. And I, like you were describing there, just die inside. And so I remember my practical tip, I'll pick up my cup of tea now, was I always used to ask that question and then slowly take my drink, pick it up, because it slows me down. It forces me not to answer my own question. It forces me, undo your bottle of water or whatever. And all the time, your cringe muscle, you're pulling a cringe muscle, as you do that. And I had to, take a practical tip like that just to get through it. Certainly in the early days.
Yeah.
I think I'm a bit more uncomfortable with silence now, but certainly for a while that would be my go-to way of extending the silence beyond my cringe could take.
Absolutely. That's a super good one. Drink something, do something else, busy yourself with something, because that pause will get you your answer, whether somebody calls somebody else out or you end up having to do it. But that uncomfortable pause will really help get the answers that you need. It's a hard one, and it's definitely worth practicing for sure.
Yeah. Well, should we
Yep.
move on?
We
Tip
can
number
move on to
5.
the next one. Yep. So the 2% difference. This is an idea that kind of comes from the Demo to Win series, but it's a really, really important one. And when we think about 2%, there are small things matter in everything. I think small things matter when you're in relationships, if we go back to the whole relationship idea, but small things matter because it's the intentional interactions. It's going through and being very intentional about how you do something. So if we think about the sales process, I mentioned at the beginning, the business partners thing. That's such a small little change of my words, but it really was able to bring it full circle and allow them to visualize the thing that I was selling even better, because I tried my hardest to use business partners in my verbiage instead of learners, which is very different words. Business partners, learners, super hard. But because I was so intentional about it and thought it through, that made the 2% difference that helped them even visualize my product even more. I mean, this could be simple as customizing your demonstrations, obviously customizing your presentations, trying to learn their language, really trying to understand their goals and pains and talking to them, remembering last meetings or calling out previous conversations. Hey, I listened to your recording last week with XYZ rep. You mentioned this. You mentioned this, Tammy. I wanted to dig into this even more with you because I want to understand this. You're personalizing it and taking it a step further. I'm calling somebody's name out. I'm saying, hey, I heard you on this last meeting I wasn't even a part of, but I want to follow up with you on this because this is so important to me. They're very, very tiny things. But when we think about it, people buy from people. People don't buy from, softwares at least. People buy, I shop online all the time. I definitely buy from I definitely buy from computers. But if we think about softwares, if we think about technology, people are buying from people. You're building those relationships. Relationships are still super important in sales. Obviously, in a virtual world, it's harder. I can't go hit golf balls with Tammy on the golf course to get her to buy my product. But how can I take that 2% difference and build those things up? It's the branding, it's the customization, it's the changing of words, it's understanding, it's listening and making those notes and calling things out from maybe conversations you weren't even involved with, but you went back and re-listened to those things and calling somebody by name. Those are such small things, but it can make the 2% difference. And if we think about, RFPs, for example, that's just pretty much a point-based thing. They have a rubric, they're filling it out, so on and so forth. But if you're going through and you're neck and neck with somebody, if you're neck and neck with a competitor, but you're just bringing a little bit more customization, a little bit more personalization, a little bit more, kind of energy and sincerity to your deals, if you're equal, who do you think that they're going to pick? If it comes down to numbers and everything's equal, who are they going to pick? Even if you're not, maybe you're a little bit more expensive. Maybe if you're missing 1 or 2 features here, but you were able to just bring it and elevate it to that next level, that's really going to help bring it across the board for you. And I think that also goes for implementation too.
Yeah, no, love it. And when you describe that, it makes me think of, there's a term, marginal gains, which has been made really popular, certainly in the UK. It was, and it's embarrassing because I've forgotten his name. I want to say Beresford, but I could be wrong. Who basically ran the British cycling team. Suddenly, the British cycling team went from being not very good to winning all the gold medals. Literally doing brilliant work. And he talked about, people will ask him, well, what have you done? Have you got this amazing, training regime? Or, what is it? And he was like, it's marginal gains. There are all of these things that are all 2%, 0.5% or whatever, and we do all of those, and they add up. And I think he's just gone to Manchester United Football Club, soccer club, as to go and do that.
I know that because of Ted Lasso. I know that because of Ted Lasso. I don't know if I should. I don't know if I should admit that, but I do know what that is because of Ted Lasso.
But no, it's exactly the same, isn't it? There's all of these little things that we do, and they all stack up.
They all just.
Stack up. Brilliant. Love it. That was number 5, I think, was it?
That was number 5. We're on our last one.
Number 6, hit me.
Yep. Number 6, a value close. Going back to the relationship idea, that's your proposal. That's your final thing. That's your sealing the deal. So if you think about it, it's your last opportunity to add your personal touch and offer like a strategic recap. If we're thinking about sales, to go in and say, hey, this is what we showed you. This is what we heard from you. This is what you saw today. This is why it's important. And having a really strong close will help them remember you. Same thing, if you're talking about any other meeting.
Can I just ask a question? Because sometimes value close sometimes feels to me, as I hear that, I go, oh, that's a bit jargon. What do you mean by value close?
Yeah. So
can you break that, unpack that a bit?
Totally. So it kind of also goes in with this tell, show, tell kind of mindset. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. And then I'm going to tell you what I told you. And so you do this tell, show, tell kind of thing. And if we're doing that consistently throughout the demos or throughout your conversation, here's what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to show you and I'm going to tell you. That end is your last opportunity to share the value of your product, of your solution, of what we're bringing to the table that will help align with their goals. Remind them of what their goals were. Remind them of what their pains were. Remind them of what even the goal of your meeting was, right? So if it's an internal meeting, what were we here to do? What did we do? People kind of zone out, we miss things. And this is your last opportunity to go ahead and have that really strong value close of alignment, of being strategic and saying, we talked about, here's your goals. Here's what we wanted to do in this meeting. Here's what you saw in this meeting. Here's what value my product, whatever it is, brought to the table. Here's how that aligns with what you need. And we have this really strong, like kind of mutual mutual close plan, essentially, of like, here is this strong thing that I'm going to leave you before we end our meeting. People remember the first thing that you say to them sometimes. Sometimes we remember the middle. You remember the end. You know what I mean? You remember that last part. It's your last opportunity to have a really strong presence before you say bye.
So it's reminding him of the why this is important.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
So finishing going, this, we've done all this stuff. There's all this tech. There's all these things. Yeah. This is why it's really important. And this is what we're going to do next. So I think you called it a value close plan. So it's this idea we're saying, right, this is why it's really important. Just to remind you, this is why it's really important, and this is what we're all going to do next. Going back to one of your tips earlier on, which was that sort of taking control a little bit, isn't it? And sort of keeping that momentum, keeping that energy to keep things going. Yeah,
and it's in that value close can help do alignment too. It reminds them of, like, you mentioned that these were your goals. You mentioned that these were your pains. we addressed all of those pains and goals with the tech or whatever it is. We have
Yeah.
alignment, see what we can do for you, see how easy our solution will be, how whatever your value statements are around your different products and in your different solutions, but you should know the value of your product and how you can sell that. That's your really great kind of ending elevator pitch, if you will. A lot of people talk about elevator pitches to like get somebody interested at the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah.
How do you end that? How do you have that final say? I guess that's still an elevator pitch, but that final say before you don't talk to them until they go debrief, or that's your last opportunity to get them excited to come back for more.
Love it. Well, do you know what? I've just glanced at the clock, and I think we are rapidly heading towards the end. So, just to sort of summarise, could you whip us through those 6 tips? Could you whip through them one more time?
Absolutely. Curiosity is key. Always ask the why and follow up with the why. Saying no sometimes, tip 2, saying no sometimes is going to be the right answer. We want to be that trusted advisor, and it's going to build trust if you're just honest. Controlling your deal is so important. And that was tip 3. You're going to go ahead and have control and drive that conversation and be the captain of whatever you're trying to do there. Practicing the pause was tip number 4. It may be uncomfortable. Active listening is so important, but if you pause and continue, you're going to get the full scope, and people are going to really feel like you're listening and giving and caring about them. And then the 5th one was the 2% difference. Going through and all those little tweaks, all the little things are going to help edge you out and beat your competition. They may seem small, but they actually really do have so much impact on your, meetings, whether that be internal or external. And then finally, that value close. It's that last tip of going in, restating everything you just said, sealing the deal, and then giving that kind of next step and making sure everybody's aligned. It's your last opportunity to give that really big, strong, full picture of what the goals were and how we can meet those needs and align together on value.
Yeah, I think they're really good, really practical, really tangible, and I think for me, as I think them through, well, ultimately what we spend our time doing in tech is transforming things, is driving change, making people be more successful with our product or enabling them to do things in a different way. Yep. And the technology is such a big part of that. But what you've gone through with us there is how do we work well with the people, and how do we inject that energy? How do we help give momentum? How do we help drive that action? And I think what you've talked through there are some really, really useful ways and practical ways that people can do that. So I think that's really good.
Thank you. And I think they're kind of minor. They're not, they're nothing's like mind-boggling or earth-shattering there. They're just like little things that you can keep even a list of the 6 and just like remind yourself, hey, I got to practice my pause. I got to do this.
Yeah. Print them out, sellotape them, or blue tack them to the side of your monitor.
Exactly.
And you've got them there ready to go.
You got to go. Uh-huh.
Brilliant. Well, just before we finally wrap up, if people have loved what you've said and want to see more, I know you put lots of stuff out on LinkedIn. Where can people get hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is going to be the best place to go find me, Maddie Suppon. You can go ahead and search for me out on LinkedIn. Happy to connect. I post a lot of things about sales engineering, being in sales, being a woman in sales. I also sprinkle in some stuff about being a mom as well and being a working mom. I think that, bringing that light to some of those things is super important as well, and how I balance those different things. So if you're interested in that kind of content, come my way. Super happy to have you.
Brilliant. And I will pop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so that anybody can click through if they want to find the right one. I don't know if there's any other Maddie Suppons out there doing stuff. I don't know.
I think my URL is still Madeline M, because I don't think I ever changed it.
From your maiden name.
From my maiden name, yep. We had to do it like freshman year of college. We had to go in and create a LinkedIn profile, and I don't actually think I ever changed it.
Right. Okay. So I'll pop that in the show notes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Final thing for me to say is just thank you. It's been wonderful to have you with us. Thank you for joining us all the way in Orlando. Thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. It was great to be here, obviously. Thank you for having me. And it was so wonderful.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.